Some people have seen where God has brought you from. You don't really understand it. They don't know your story.
Hello and welcome to You Don't Know My Story, a daily television program where people come on and tell their stories. They're talking about themselves, what they went through, and where they are today. But before we begin the show, I want to start off by talking about the coronavirus, the Corona-19, where people don't quite understand what this virus is doing to the world. People are just being hard-headed, and I can't understand it. It's not my place, but God keeps telling me each and every morning when I wake up, tell your friends, tell your family to wear a face mask when they go in the public. And that's what I try to do. I try to tell everyone to be safe. You got to remember, this is an unseen virus that we really don't know a whole lot about. They have not even found a cure for it yet. So all we're trying to do is warn people, to tell people to be careful. I did a sermon about 2 weeks ago, and it was called, "This is not a test, it's a warning." God has been warning us ever since the beginning of time when he first warned Adam about not eating of the fruit from the garden. And it's going on down now. He's telling us daily, it's a warning. It's not a test, y'all. It's not a test. You got to pay attention to what's going on. I know a lot of people don't watch the news. I watch the news. I want to hear what's going on every day. I want to know about my neighbors. I want to know about my own family. I even want to know about myself because I want to be tested myself as soon as I get that opportunity. But all I'm saying is, please, please, wear a face mask. It doesn't have anything to do with your First Amendments. It doesn't have anything to do with your rights. All we're saying is protect yourself and your family. You can go out, you can come home with it, you don't even know you got it. You can pass it on to your grandparents, your children, your wife, your girlfriend, whoever. All we're saying is be careful. We'll be right back.
I love the Lord. He heard my cry and pitied every groan. Long as I live and trouble rise, I'll hasten to his throne. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, tell me where shall I go? That's why I love the Lord. He heard my cry and pitied every groan. Long as I live and trouble rise, I'll hasten to his throne. Ah, Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. As long as I live, I know that I can hasten to your throne.
Well, thank you once again, Mr. Davis, our house singer. Well, I really appreciate you, sir. You do a fantastic job. Each and every time you come, you do a fantastic job. So I want to say thank you. He'll be back. He has another song before he leaves. But right now, we are getting ready to interview some fantastic people. I have some fantastic folks that came to tell their story today. Mr. Will Jacobs. Will was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, where he witnessed firsthand the evolution of the civil rights movement beginning in Montgomery in 1955. He graduated from George Washington Carver High School in Montgomery in 1968, enlisted in the United States Army in 1979, and was trained as a military policeman. As a military policeman, he served 2 years providing physical security for the Army One, the President's helicopter, President Richard Nixon. After separating from the United States Army, Will joined the Alexandria Police Department in Alexandria, Virginia. Will eventually went back to college, joined the ROTC, and became a commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, and completed 28 years of military service. 28 years. Will is now a practicing licensed real estate agent. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Will Jacobs. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Call me anything but late for lunch.
Late for lunch. Well, good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I am so glad to see you. You know, with this coronavirus thing, we had to postpone the original show that you were on, but God always bring a ram in the bush. So we're glad that you're here today to tell the audience about your story. I'm not going to take up too much time. I want you to look at your camera and tell folks about Mr. Will Jacobs in your own words.
In my own words, okay. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. This is a real humbling experience. I appreciate the opportunity. And the irony of it is that I feel very strongly that history is definitely, I don't know whether it's repeating itself or it's just some unfinished chapters. But right now, today, it's a sad but a very inspiring moment. Because I can recall, again, being from Montgomery, Alabama, which I don't know whether you knew it or not, was the capital of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. And growing up in that Jim Crow South, I mean, in the stronghold of Jim Crowism, it really taught us how the true strengths come from inside, based on how we learn how to endure things, you know, in a very challenging way every day. But I was truly blessed to be surrounded by so many inspiring people. For obviously my grandmother, but you know, again, grew up with my grandmother in Cleveland Court, and we lived at 638 Cleveland Court. And I don't know if you're familiar with that address, but next door to us on the common wall was a lady by the name of Rosa Parks. Mm-hmm. And it was Miss Parks, her husband, and her mother. And we lived on what we call the cap unit. It was the one bedroom, so we shared bedrooms there, my grandmother's side and their side. But we used to see Miss Parks, her husband, every day, and you know, we interact, you know, with them. Being a kid, of course, I was 5, but still have a pretty good memory of things. And her mother, while Miss Parks and her husband worked, her moms would bake to make additional funds. And every once in a while, I would stand my little skinny butt out there by the window to play with the squirrels, and she'll sit me every once in a while and give me a cookie. Not too many, because they didn't want to cut into the profits too much. But we interacted quite a bit. We also attended Hope Street Baptist Church. I don't know if you're familiar with Hope Street Baptist or not. Most times when people hear of the church bombing in Alabama, they think about Birmingham. But prior to that was Hope Street Baptist Church, which was the largest Baptist church in Montgomery at the time, and that's where all the activities were. It was on the corner of Hope and Bullock Street. And I remember just before Christmas of '55, when my grandmother's sister, who lived on the corner of Bullock and Airline, called and let us know that the church had been bombed. And as luck would have it, we had family members that lived across the street on Holt and Bullock from the church, the Grahams. Their house, which was wood at the time, was also bomb damaged. So we walked up, and that was right after Dr. King had been installed as the president of the MIA, which is the Montgomery Improvement Association. And I remember as a little kid watching all those activities because we were, that was our lives then. And after the church bombing, things really got a little bit hectic. Then we had the bus boycott. And about how Ms. Parks became the champion of that. And which is so sad is that when we were fighting, I was a kid, and when she didn't give up her seat, what they were petitioning for from the bus company was that the blacks would get on the bus and fill it from the back to the front. The whites would get on the bus and fill it from the front to the back. And once the bus was full, nobody would have to give up. And that was unacceptable. Can you imagine? That's an interesting compromise, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Huh? Yeah. But also grew up with names like E.D. Nixon, who was the president of NAACP at the time. Ms. Parks was the secretary. And E.D., he was a port at Union train station, but he was a big, uneducated guy. But he had a lot of street sense. He was smart, very, very, very smart. And he was family connected also, by way of my aunt and all. But anyway, like I said, I remember so much activities because I graduated from Carver in '68, and those 13 years, it was just full of civil rights. It was our daily life.
Yeah.
And I also went to St. Jude Catholic School, which was the last campsite in the Selma to Montgomery March. And they got blackballed for sponsoring it, the campsite. You remember all those things. That was our everyday life. But when we hear a lot of rhetoric coming from the top, as we are experiencing today, a lot of people don't realize how powerful those words resonate and how they inspire people who would otherwise be cowards to come out. I can share a story. I had two cousins who lived in Lowndes County, James and Robert. And I remember when the Klan came to get them. And one of the Klan members, they were at the store down the country, down in Haynesville, Leader-Hatchie area, and they slipped away and told my aunt, they're going to come and get your boys. And sure enough, if you've ever been down south, you know how you got those houses way off the road. So pretty soon the cars start coming up, the dogs start barking and everything. The Klan came up to the house, and they were able to convince my aunt to call them out of hiding and asked them told them put on some shoes. So they obediently put on some shoes. They said, we're not going to hurt them, we just want to talk to them. So they took them. You know what cuckabugs are? Briars, those little round sticker balls. They grow in the vine on the ground. Well, what they did was they took them to a big cuckabug patch, and in the middle of it, they had cleared it, and they had them to take their shoes off. Then they began to beat James. By them being in a drunken state, things got out of hand. So Robert, growing up in the country, you're barefoot, your feet about as tough as leather. So he ran through the cuckabug patch, ran out on Highway 80, Selma to Montgomery Highway, and he ran in front of his car, and a white man was driving it. He told him what happened. He said, well, they're going to be waiting down the road for you. Get in the trunk. So Robert obediently got in the trunk. He brought him. Sure enough, they got down the road. The Klan had set up a roadblock, and he asked him, say, hey, have you seen an N? So the old white man said, no, I ain't seen nobody. And they waved him on through, brought him up to Montgomery. And we were living in Jackson Heights. There was only 2 streets, Regent Circle and Roundtree. So the reason I know the story, because they brought Robert to live with us because my mother had basically grown up in New Orleans. So she didn't have that direct connection to the family name as some of the other family members. A few nights later, the Klan came into the neighborhood. It was a big shooting. Robert and I lying on the floor, listening to the shooting. He's the sheer terror on his face. And I'm like, wow. So when the shooting stopped, we're trying to figure out, okay, who won? Pretty soon, our guys came in, let them know that they had ran the Klan off. The Klan wasn't finished. And again, how words from the top down can have allow people to act with immunity. Then the Klan began. We got word that they were staking out H&L Green, which was downtown on Dexter, right down from the state capitol, Washington Park, Trailway bus station, Greyhound, Union's train station, all the cab stands, all of the locations that blacks use for transportation. Looking for Robert. They had killed James. So the community had to end up collecting money, paying someone who had a car to take the back road to Birmingham to ship Robert to Cleveland. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks before we heard from Robert, and we just knew that somebody had tipped off the state troopers, because they were all part of this conspiracy too, as you can see from the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge incident. But eventually, about 3 weeks later, we heard from Robert. And so then the concern turned from, wow, if they found out that Robert got away, they might want Junior as a replacement. That was me. Anyway, no big deal. But because, you get to see so much of this humiliating behavior. And so that's why I can somewhat relate to the frustration young people dealing with today. And even though we may not endorse a lot of it, but I can recall my grandfather, who was an excellent auto mechanic. He worked for this guy, Red Campbell, who was a Klansman. And what they would do, my grandfather would borrow money from Red. He was, like I said, being an alcoholic. Every Friday, whenever, the police would stop, pull him over, arrest him, take all of his money. So he had to go back and borrow money from Robert. From Red. And I just sit there and look at my grandfather humiliation of the cops who had arrested him and taken his money, now laughing with his boss. And there was nothing he could do. That kind of humiliation. And I'm sitting there as a kid witnessing this, And also, like I said, remember when Dr. King's house got bombed? Like I said, we were living that when the police came up on Jackson and was on the horses beating everybody. And the guy who owned the horses that the police was using had a grocery store in the black community. And you knew all of that, and just such a real sense of helplessness to be able to endure that. So like I said, I went to St. Jude for 6 years, and again, they were blackballed. And what I mean by blackballed, prior to them hosting the civil rights movement, the city rotated emergency service among the hospitals. After that, they were removed, from the list. But you got to see the James Brown, Hosea Williams, Abernathy. You saw these people on a regular basis, and then out there on the big ground, you got to see the Supreme, the whole 9 yards. We were just kind of a living experience. But what we gathered from that was the spirit and the strength of that movement. And that's when you learn that you can go in the gym and pump 500 pounds, but if you can't pick up 5 pounds from your heart, you're weak. Okay? And, but I can recall one incident, carrying all that anger and everything. Myself and some of my friends from the projects there, we were down there shooting by a train trestle down in Washington Park. And it's a graveyard, and they were just building a new project via the village that we were eventually going to move to. And this city worker came by on a grader. You know what a grader? Where they grade the street, make it level. And I don't know what caused me to do it, but I took my BB gun and shot at him. All he did was just drive past me. But all of this, for some reason, I felt empowered. So I just instinctively, I shot at him. Well, he came to a screeching halt, jumped off of it, came out with a .38. And he had pointed at me, and as luck would have it, a police sergeant came around the corner right about that time. He said, John, no, don't do it, John. So that's what kept him from shooting me. So as a consolation, he gave the guy the BB gun, and so he got to spanked me with the BB gun, and then threw the BB gun. But my friends, they had taken off running and everything. So I don't know how many times, 5, 6 times, whatever, he threw the BB gun away. Well, you know, having that project mentality, that wasn't my gun. I had borrowed the gun, so I couldn't go back without the gun.
Right.
So I went and caught them and jumped on them for, first of all, for leaving me. You know, they violated the rule. You know what I'm saying? You're not supposed to run off and leave your buddies. Okay? You know, you're supposed to be ride or die. So anyway, so I went and got them and everything, and we finally went back and we found the BB gun and up on the top of the train track. So the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm just pumping it, and everything. The guy was still down there. My daddy told me I was stupid because all this time we were right next to a cemetery.
We could have buried
it. Okay, and they still had one open. So this time I pumped the gun. So at the top of the time, I shot at him, but this time I took off running. And I can remember the day that I was in the 12th grade, the day that Dr. King was assassinated, because me being a management challenge, the teachers decided, you know, first of all, they made me the drum major in the band. They kept giving me responsibility. And so, but that particular day, I remember I was teaching the class. I was a senior, but the teacher said, hey, look, if you won't shut up, I'll give you something to do. So when they ran in, and told me that Dr. King had been assassinated, that was a real moving day. And then I remember after graduated from high school, I attended Alexander City Junior College, and that was, Lurleen Wallace was the governor at the time. George had ran 2 terms. Lurleen did his 3rd term. So and was driving 60 miles to integrate. You know, I don't know if you've heard of Russell Mills, where they build all the sports apparel. That's up in Alexander City. And I tell you, and that's when we got to see the rest of it. And again, being a management challenge, I had graduated to when they went. I had to go see somebody. I graduated all the way up to see the university president. I went past the dean and everybody else. But so eventually I convinced them that we should have race relation sessions, so we get to know. And because I can remember what really motivated it was we was in a world history class, Mr. Pulliam class, and they had a young lady to come in. She was very dark and everything, and she came in. Ruby was her name. She was sitting over there crying, and I asked her, what's wrong? And she pointed at this white guy and said, he called me a black bee. I said, what? I said, who? She said, him. I said, really? So I got up, I walked around, and I went while he was in his chair, blocked him in so he couldn't get his leg out. And I said, hey, she said that you called her a black bee. And he said, well, what if I did? I said, well, I'm going to whip you, I use some words I don't want to repeat and everything. And he couldn't get out, so he looked at the teacher, and Mr. Teacher said, well, I think you should apologize.
Yeah.
And so he said, I'm sorry. I said, no, you got to say it like you mean it. And so he probably repeated 3 or 4 times. And then I told him, I said, if I ever hear of you disrespecting one of our women, I'm gonna come find you. So the word got out, so I was able to convince the dean that we should have some race relation sessions. And that's when we found out the other side. We had one young white kid that told his story, how his black nanny was more of his mother to him than his mother. If he got sick in the middle of the night, his mother would get up and go get her. But just before, when he turned about 6 years old and about to go start school, she called him in and told him that from this day forward, if she don't call you Mr. whatever, you come and tell us.
Right.
And how he shared his story of how that really hurt his heart to sit there and require her to do that. Because in his heart, that was his real mother.
Yeah.
And then we had another situation where there were a number of kids, white kids that came down to Montgomery and attended some of our meetings. And I had one to call me in the middle of the night, white guy, and because his mother had kicked him out because she had found some black literature that he refused to get rid of. So I got up. My mom's worked from 11 to 7 as a nurse there at St. Jude. And I went and got him, brought him home. Next morning she came home. We were sitting there eating. She didn't ask any questions, and he just stayed with us until his brother, who was in the Air Force in California, sent for him. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable, you know. Yeah. But then after that, after about a year in school, I was a music major, and you know, Lionel Richie and those boys, they was up there in Tuskegee kicking it, you know, the Commodores, and we had a band called the New Breed and everything, and you know, and so we were just doing it to chase girls. Yeah. We weren't trying to make no money or do anything. So chasing, I ended up getting somebody pregnant, so here I go. So I ended up in the Army, and that's where life really propelled me, really springboard me forward. Yeah. And while I was in military police school at Fort Gordon, I went through basic training, but in military police school, they came through, and I was selected for a special duty assignment. Didn't know what it was at the time, and but as it turned out, it was the Presidential Support Unit.
Right.
And after ended up getting my clearance, so I ended up joining them. That's how I got introduced to the Air Force, because at that time, Nixon was president, and the unit was stationed at Homestead Air Force Base. And in the Army in those days, you were open bay barracks, you know, whatever the mess sergeant put on your plate, that was it. Yeah. I was so impressed by the Air Force because it was 2 guys to a room. You can go back as many times. If you had your uniform on, you can have midnight chow and everything. Yeah. But having that experience and being in like I said, you've seen the guy that when the president comes down the steps, the guy that salutes. I did that for a couple of years and everything, and that really introduced me to how the rest of the world lives.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you, this is a fantastic story. I'm just so sad that we just don't have a lot of time.
That's okay.
You know, because the story is fantastic, and what you're talking about is really worth listening to. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring you back.
Okay.
So I want you to remember where you left off, because there's more to the story. Right. Because I would like to let people know that you are a licensed real estate agent here in Dayton, Ohio. And with you telling your story, especially from the beginning, we just getting to the meat of the thing, you know, and like I said, it's a shame that we just don't have a lot of time.
That's okay.
You know,
okay.
So what I want to do is I want to bring you back on another show.
Okay.
Later on down the line, because I want you to pick up on where you left off, because you have an interesting story and it's fantastic, and I want to hear more. I mean, I couldn't even say nothing. My mouth was closed. I was into it. So, but I want to thank Mr. Jacobs for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you. May God bless you. And like I said, we will be bringing you back.
That's good. Thank you,
Thank you so much.
All right.
We'll be right back.
It's amazing how people can come together by spending time apart. Quest Diagnostics thanks you for doing your part to stop the spread of the coronavirus through social distancing and proper hygiene. At Quest, we're doing our part by establishing COVID-19 lab testing capabilities across the country to better serve our communities and healthcare providers. If you suspect you had COVID-19, talk to a healthcare provider. And let's keep doing our part so we can all come back together stronger than ever.
Well, welcome back to You Don't Know My Story. Well, we have another fantastic guest, and if you think you heard that story, wait till you hear this story. This one's gonna knock you off your socks. Well, knock your socks off, let me change that. Let me introduce you to my next guest. Her name is Miss Willa Brewer. Was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. She started her work career as a defensive electric supply center, known as DESC, and was transferred from Columbus, Ohio Defense Department in 1994 and retired, completing 30 years for the federal government in the year 2000. She also retired from USAF, I guess that stands for United States Air Force, and was fortunate enough to start a teaching career, at, what's that,
Groveport.
Groveport Madison High School for 3 years. She then moved back to Dayton to be with and take care of her mother. She said that she is a proud mother of 2 wonderful children and 5 great grandchildren. Well, let's go with just grandchildren, not great.
No, great.
She said not great, but grandchildren. Willa's hobbies are golfing and dancing. I seen her dance. Y'all got to see her dance. Oh, she get out on that dance floor. Lord have mercy. I can imagine what she is on the golf course too. She said that she had not mastered either one yet. Both she will continue trying to get better at both. Well, Willa is a member of Phillips Temple Church here in Dayton, Ohio. She was raised in the church and says she will always be in church until her turn to be called home, to be with the Almighty, whom I owe everything to. We all owe everything to the Almighty. Without further ado, Miss Willa Brewer. Hi, Miss Willa.
Hi, how are
How you doing, huh?
I'm fine, thank you.
It is so good to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm fortunate enough to have you on the show because you're going to talk about some things that we were trying to get involved in, but when this coronavirus hit, it kind of put a damper on some of the things. Because I've been reading the script that you was telling me the story about the people that was killed in Columbus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And you wrote a play in reference to it.
Yes.
And I have been reading it, but I kind of stopped reading, because of the coronavirus, because there ain't nothing we can really do with it. But I've been reading some of your other literature and some of your other stuff that you have done, and I'm excited. There's one that you're going to talk about. I'm not going to mention. I'm going to let you talk about it. But I was reading a little bit about it, and I'd like to do that on one of my shows. I really would.
Okay.
So hopefully we can work that out and maybe do it. So without any further ado, it's your floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me tell you one reason why I started writing plays was because that when I worked for DESE, every year we would have something to recognize black people for. Mm-hmm. And they would always bring in a black speaker, a minister, and then they'd have a little dinner afterwards. And it was always the same thing, and it was getting so boring. Mm-hmm. So I decided to say, I'm going to do something else because there was so much chaos going on in Dayton at that time. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of young blacks getting killed, and I got so sick of it, I just started wanting to write about it. Mm-hmm. So my first play was called Take a Look at Black America. Okay. What do you see?
All right.
Take a look at Black America. What do you see? When you looked at it, all you saw was our young boys being killed, people shooting each other, people stealing from each other, and you get tired. Why are we as black people, based upon what we've gone through, mm-hmm. abusing one another? So that's why I decided to write this play. Okay. And it was well received. You see,
right.
My general here, this was one of the most fantastic generals they've ever had at DESE.
Okay.
And
you have a military career too, huh?
He had tears in his eyes after this play was over with. And
so
this is a Marine.
So let me just ask, you had a military career also?
Yes.
Okay.
I spent 21 years as an Air Force reservist.
Okay.
But I was on a lot of tours of duty all the time. And plus, when I was selected, I was selected to be the dorm chief when I got to basic training. Mm. So I was pretty good there, which I'd never wanted that, but they asked me why wouldn't I volunteer, and I said I just didn't. They said, well, we want you to be the dorm chief.
All right.
And then I ended up, when I got to my military base, I was selected as first sergeant because the way I worked all the time. Yeah. So I was first sergeant, and I retired as a master sergeant from the base. And my second project that I worked on, it was a musical. It was called Then, Now, and Forever Music.
All right.
In other words, I wanted to look at the music and wanted people to focus on what we did back then, what we're doing now, and music that would last forever. And our music always lasts forever. And I loved Billie Holiday. So, and there was a picture of me doing Billie Holiday's
All
number.
You do sing too, right?
Yeah, I used to. I don't do too much of it now. But because of all the things I did, I had an article written up about me in the paper. So I still have the old article here that was written up. I was surprised about it, but it was.
Okay.
Then later on in life, I was transferred to Columbus, Ohio, totally. And there they wanted me to do something special with the kids. And they had never done this before because they always had something for Black History Month all the time. But what they would have was a teacher playing music with little kids singing, which was really boring. So I wanted to do something a little different.
All right.
So I found out about the first Black golfing team that ever beat a white team. So I decided to write this story about a man named William Bill Powell. His team was the first team to ever beat the white team. It was a struggle, but they did it. And he was also the first Black man to build a golf course outside of Dayton, Ohio, not far from here somewhere. I can't remember. But that was my third project.
Now, the one you just was talking about with William Powell. Now,
Yes.
you also did like a play or a narration
Yes,
about it.
my students.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
And my students, I had them to do the play because the way I set it up, the schools, I can't remember the schools, it might be in here, but don't remember the schools. But the all-Black team, which is the first Black team that ever beat a white team in golf, the colors were green and orange. I think my kids were the green team. That was the colors. And they were the first Black team to ever beat a white team. So I wrote this little play about it. And we actually there was some kind of a contest that they would have every year for Black History Month. But they had a Caucasian teacher who had a bunch of little kids, and they would sing every year. Of course, everybody thinks young kids are so cute when they're singing, but after a while it's a little boring. So I decided, I want that. So I had teenagers. I had seniors and juniors. So I decided to write the play and have them to put on a show as far as what went down back when they won it. And so the first place prize was $1,000. Second place was $500, and the third place was $250. But now my kids ended up winning the $500 because, of course, the white school with the white team and the little kids singing. Every year they won the $1,000. And it wasn't because they were that good. And my kids, now this is the funny part, when we left, we got second place, but when we left, my kids were just so upset. They were going, Miss B, you know we were better. You know we should have won. I'm like, okay, yeah, but just settle down. We didn't, but that's okay. We won second place. So that money went to the school, our school. But they did a fabulous job.
Yeah.
And
well, I want to just say one more thing. Let me. This I was looking this over, and I really would like to talk to you about maybe doing a reenactment of this on one of the shows. Maybe we'll dedicate it to Mr. William Bill Powell. It's interesting. This was in 2008 when you wrote this. Maybe we might be able to do something with this. You know, I really would like to do something on the show and dedicate the show to this gentleman. And maybe we'll be able to
bring his daughter in.
Yeah, that would be great because his daughter did autograph this for her. Maybe we'll bring his daughter here, and maybe she can say something after the show. We'll work on that.
And I think I did say he was the first Black man to ever build a golf course.
Yes, you did say that. First black to ever build a golf course. So you know that is special. Okay, you can go ahead and continue.
Okay. And my large masterpiece that you said reads like a, what was this?
A movie?
Yeah, a movie, which it probably so, but I just got so carried away with it.
Right.
That's why it's so thick. We can always
Now,
reduce
that's
it
the
down.
one you was talking about, so many black men was getting killed.
I was going to say what really
Go.
made me do this.
Yeah, go
What
ahead.
made me write this story is that in Columbus, there were 23 young black men who got killed, just like back to back within 3 months' time, 3 or 4 months' time. And I was so disturbed by it that I thought, somebody needs to do something.
Yeah.
Something. But I didn't think about writing the story. I went to the library and did a lot of research on the young black men that were killed. But I didn't think about actually writing the story until I found out that one of the mothers in our church, her grandson was murdered. And that's when it hit me. This has got to stop. Maybe if I write a story about it
Right.
and put it out there, maybe it'll do something. So I got a chance to interview the young man's mother. We could not really get through that whole interview without, we were both in tears. It was in tears. But it was very interesting. He was an A student in chemistry. His teacher, one of the chemistry teachers, she spoke so well about this young man, but it was so devastating that it was just hard.
Yeah.
And at the funeral, they did have the funeral at our church, which was huge, First Church of God.
Right.
And our pastor had to have uniformed guys out in front because he wanted to make sure, because you know how kids will start, teenagers, they might start fighting, and we weren't going to have that. But our church was filled. Because this young man, it just touched me because he was such a smart young man. And he was going somewhere in life, and then he was struck down. So that was what made me write the story. And I called it Living at the Edge of Nowhere, Bad Choices That Young People Make.
Yes.
And so
Well.
that's it.
Well, that's another story that we will be working on. Hopefully next year. She got quite a bit that I've seen. I took a very much interest in. I'm really interested, especially the story that she was talking about. I think I mentioned to her about wanting to do a movie about it, because it's just that big that it's more of a movie script than a play script. So hopefully, God's willing, we might be able to do that. I want to thank you, Miss Willa Brewer, for coming on and telling your story. And I know you ain't done. It's more. It's just that we just don't have a lot of time, to tell all these stories. I just want to leave you with this. Black lives do matter,
Oh, yes.
but we got to stop killing each other.
Absolutely.
In Chicago over the weekend, I think they had 75 shootings.
My
2 little kids died within this weekend. 2 girls were murdered, okay? We talk about Black Lives Matter. We protest and we march and we do all these things, and it's a shame what happened to George Floyd, but we have to think about ourselves also. We have to think about one another. Each and every day I read in the newspaper or I see on television, this black kid getting killed by another black kid. But you go around talking about Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter that much, why are we killing each other if it matters?
Yeah.
We have to get an understanding. That's why, and I hate to say it this way, but white folks look at it like this. You killing your own self. We ain't got to do it. You killing your own selves. So we got to stop killing each other. You got to wear your face mask. Get out of that thing about I don't care what happens to me. A friend of mine said the same thing, and his best friend died because he didn't care. As long as God put it in my heart to mention it, I will mention it each and every day. To wear your face mask when you're in public. You don't know each other. They don't know you. You don't know them. You don't know who got what. Got to remember, this is an unseen virus. It's a disease that we cannot see. Now they talk about airborne, okay? Wear the face mask. It's not gonna hurt you to wear the face mask in public. I really say this from the bottom of my heart, you know, that I care that much about you. God cares about you, I care about you. Wear your face mask. We'll be right back with Mr. Richard Davis to end our show for us. We'll be right back.
The FDA is committed to protecting the health of the American people, and we wanted to take a moment to thank the workers on the front lines for their efforts to combat COVID-19. Keeping Americans safe from this pandemic wouldn't be possible without the hard work of so many Americans. So thank you to our food and beverage distributors, our food service workers, our food delivery drivers, our medical providers, our doctors, our nurses, our veterinarians, and many others, for your continuing work and to provide essential services during this difficult time. We also want to thank every American for doing their part in practicing social distancing, washing their hands, and following CDC guidance. We will get through this together. For more information on FDA's efforts against COVID-19, please visit fda.gov.
My protection, God is. He's my all and all. God is my light in darkness. Oh, yes, He is. God is. He's my all and all. God is my joy in sorrow. Oh, God is. He's my all and all. God is my joy in sorrow. Oh, yes, He is. God is. Ooh, He's my all and all. God is today and mine tomorrow. Oh, God is my God is my God is who God is my God is my God is woo. God is my all and oh, God is the joy and the strength of my life. He moves all pain, misery, and strife. He promised to keep me, never to leave me. He never ever falls short of his word. I have to fast and pray, stay in the narrow way. Keep my life clean every day. I'm gonna go with him when he comes back. I've come too far and I'll never turn back. God is my God is my God is my God is God is my all and oh, God is my all and God is my all and
God is my all. What a beautiful, beautiful song by Mr. Richard Davis, our house singer. I thank you so very much. You always put your heart and soul into what you do. What I like to do is I like to bring the guests back up as we get ready to say goodnight. Miss Willa Brewer. Come on, Miss Willa. You're going to hear some things about her later on in the years as time goes on. And my man, Mr. Jacobs, real estate mogul, his fantastic story that he was talking about, he's coming back. He ain't done. He got more to talk about. But first of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for a great job. Well done. And one more thing before I say goodnight. Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. Stop killing each other in Jesus' name. Good night. See you next time. Oh, remember, Sunday, 4 p.m., Thursday morning, 11 p.m. on Spectrum Television, DATV, Channel 5. Good night.